If man is not to be like a reed in the wind, like a ship on the boundless sea, or feel as though he were walking on a bottomless quagmire, he will need at the emotional stage something firm for his feeling, and at the mental stage something firm for his thinking. Up to now, this something has not been in accordance with reality. Since mankind cannot unaided acquire a knowledge of existence, of its meaning and goal, or a knowledge of cosmic reality and life, it has always had this knowledge given to it, by whom will be shown later. This has entailed definite risks. The knowledge that confers power, the knowledge of laws and forces of nature and their use, has always been abused for selfish ends, and those who have not been able to comprehend the knowledge of reality have always distorted it into superstition and false doctrines. Along with knowledge goes responsibility for the right use of knowledge. Abuse of knowledge leads to the loss of knowledge, and where whole nations are concerned, to their annihilation. On 2 occasions, whole continents have had to be submerged into the depths of the sea, Lemuria and Atlantis. After those 2 failures, it was decided that the knowledge should be imparted in secret schools of knowledge only, and only to those who had reached such a stage of development that they could understand correctly and not misinterpret what they were taught, but apply it correctly in the service of life. They were taught how to think correctly. For the last 45,000 years, esoteric knowledge orders have been instituted among nations that have reached a sufficiently high level. Since knowledge is remembrance anew, those who have never been initiated cannot see the correctness of esoterics. The knowledge orders comprised several degrees. Those in the lowest degree were given carefully elaborated symbols, which could be interpreted in a new way in each higher degree, so that only those who reached the highest degree were able to fully understand the whole of it. The procedure involved difficulties in that those who did not reach the highest degree sometimes made their own and erroneous systems of thought. For those not admitted to these orders, religions were instituted, corresponding to different nations' ability to understand and their need of norms of expedient activity. The rapid rise in general enlightenment and the advances of science made other measures necessary. Ever since the 18th century, the conflict between belief and knowledge, between which those are unable to distinguish who believe they know, comprehend, understand, has grown more and more accentuated. All are believers who lack the exact knowledge of reality, also those who say they do not believe in anything. This conflict began with the anti-religious and anti-metaphysical philosophy of enlightenment, and grew more and more during the 19th century, with the progress of scientific research. Laplace with his Système du Monde, Lamarck, Darwin, Spencer, and Haeckel with the theory of evolution, convinced natural scientists that, quote, unquote, they did not need the hypothesis of a spiritual world. Their attacks on the old life views led to a growing uncivilizing disorientation, so that people finally, quote, felt increasingly uncertain about right and wrong. They are even uncertain whether right and wrong are anything but old superstition. There is a danger that mankind, in its madness, will exterminate itself. It became necessary to take steps to counter this frenzy, and it was decided to allow the safe part of the esoteric knowledge, which mankind is now able to comprehend, if not to understand its significance, to be made exoteric. Mankind thus got a chance of forming a rational conception of reality and life, as well as the meaning and goal of existence. Belief was not permitted in the esoteric orders. In these, the question was always that of comprehending and understanding, not believing. In the lowest degree, they were taught to distinguish between belief and assumption. Belief is absolute and unreasonable emotional conviction, unamenable to correction or reason. Everybody has his petty beliefs about almost any absurdity, and this is because man is unable to truly know anything but definitively established facts in the visible world. In contrast, assumption is preliminary, valid only until one has come to know, is amenable to rational arguments, and desires correction. Authorities there may well be in all spheres of life, but their assumptions do not amount to any final verdict for common sense, which, however different for each of us, is still the highest sense, and that which everybody ought to strive to develop. It is the individual's synthetic instinct of life acquired through his incarnations. During the last 2,000 years, there has been an unremitting conflict between different ideologies, a conflict between theology and philosophy, theology and science, philosophy and science. In the history of European philosophy, it is chiefly the conflict between theology and philosophy that is apparent. In this conflict, theology has almost always had the support of those in political power. Philosophy has had to fight its way step by step, with unspeakable toil and millions of martyrs, to achieve freedom of thought and expression, tolerance and humanity. These gains are instead threatened by the Marxist ideology, which forbids the individual to think in any other way than what those in power decree. This is the new tyranny of thought. That mental development is hampered by this new kind of idiotization even the simplest intellect should be able to see. The conflict between theology and science began with Galilei and is still going on. The conflict between philosophy and science has been called off, at least for the time being, now that the philosophers have finally become either agnostics, who deny the possibility of ascertaining superphysical facts, or anti-metaphysicians, who deny the existence of superphysical reality. Throughout the history of philosophy, which actually begins with the sophists, we can trace the attempts made by human reason to solve the problems of existence on its own without esoteric knowledge, with access to physical sense only. That this was bound to fail will become manifest in what follows, but it is only in our times that people in general are beginning to see that it is impossible. Science lacks the organs of perception necessary to this, and the scientist refuses to concern himself with things that cannot be investigated by the instruments of natural research. Logically, this is perfectly defensible. It should be pointed out that Indian yoga philosophy is not consistent with the facts of esoteric knowledge, but is based on misinterpretation of some of these. Rebirth has been turned into a meaningless metempsychosis, so that it is considered possible for man to be reborn as an animal, whereas reversion to an inferior natural kingdom is in fact precluded. Evolution through the mineral, vegetable, animal, and human kingdoms is considered to end with man's entry into and extinction in nirvana, whereas nirvana is not really the end, but the beginning. The Indian interpretation of manas, buddhi, nirvana, atma, and karma is misleading, as is also the absolute subjectivism of Advaita, which makes knowledge of the matter and motion aspects of existence impossible.